Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Chef AJ, and welcome to the preview day of the Real Truth About Weight Loss Summit. I am so excited you're here. It's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a pleasure to deliver you this information that I've been wanting to deliver for over 5 years. Doing a summit like this has been a dream of mine. I just didn't know the technology, but as luck would have it, there's really brilliant people out there, even though they're all the way in Singapore, like Toby, who hosted the Plant Fit Summit, who I met, and he came all the way to the United States flying on several airplanes to help me deliver this to you. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I have. And I'm going to be with you every step of the summit, even though I've listened to each of these interviews probably 3 times already. Every single time I take notes and I learn something new. If you're not familiar with me, that's okay, because on day 9, I'll share my story with you. It's been my passion and my life's work to figure out this problem, this weight loss problem. And I've interviewed 34 people, 34 experts, doctors, dietitians, influencers, coaches, chefs that have also been able to figure out this problem, not just for themselves, but for the hundreds of people that they've helped and influenced. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. And what I'm going to do now is go over each day who we're going to talk to, what you're going to learn, and we'll start with day 1, which is tomorrow, by the way. We're going to be running this live, and it's important. Well, if you can't watch live, obviously you can't, or listen live. But if you want to get in on the giveaways, we have some amazing prizes every day from some of our very generous sponsors that we're going to be giving out live. You have to be live to win these prizes. We are giving away 2 Instant Pot electric pressure cookers. I thought we were giving away 2 for the entire 9-day summit. Nope. 2 Instant Pots every day. So if that's not an incentive to listen live, I don't know what else is. So many other generous prizes are being donated, such as a Holland Mill Bowl. If you're not familiar with that, if you like to eat salads, and if you want to eat more salads, one of the best ways to eat salads is to chop them. And this is the best way to do it. A Holland Mill Bowl will be given away during the summit. My favorite skincare line, which is not only vegan, but it's made out of fruits and vegetables. You could even eat it. Kaylin Harwell will be giving away some of her fantastic products every day. I know her eye cream is on the schedule, as well as her toner and all kinds of wonderful things. Beet Boost, one of the products highly recommended by one of our speakers, John Pierre. We're going to be giving away a Beet Boost every single day. What else do we have? How about some California balsamic so that you can dress your delicious salad that you're going to be chopping in your Holland Mill Bowl? So make sure you listen live if you'd like to win stuff. We're also going to be doing Q&A live so that you can ask questions and we can talk in between the segments and after the segments. We're going to start every day at 10 a.m. Pacific time and go for as long as it takes to get through the interviews. And you'll have 24 hours in which to listen to each of these interviews. Tomorrow, we're going to be kicking off the day at 10 a.m. on Saturday, March 16th, that's Pacific time, with multiple New York Times bestselling author Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And Dr. Fuhrman is going to be talking about the cascade of toxic hunger, cravings, and cancer. You definitely won't want to miss this one. And especially if you watch the video, there's going to be a surprise guest in the middle that made it very hard for me not to laugh. Not at Dr. Fuhrman, but at the surprise guest that makes an appearance. So if you want to learn about the cascade of toxic hunger, cravings, and cancer, you definitely want to watch Dr. Fuhrman's presentation. Right after Dr. Fuhrman's presentation is somebody that I had never met until I interviewed her, and she is as gorgeous as she is smart. Her name is Dr. Angie Sadeghi, and she is a gastroenterologist in California. She has a weight loss story herself, and it's really interesting because many of our speakers who are medical doctors also have their own weight loss story. And she's going to be talking about our gut health and how that is the key to a better metabolism, which of course is going to be the key to weight loss. I think you're really going to enjoy her interview. Our next interview tomorrow is Dr. Michael Roizen. And Dr. Roizen is actually the boss of one of our other speakers. He was highly recommended by Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr., and they both work at the Cleveland Clinic, where Dr. Roizen is the Chief Wellness Officer. He's going to be talking about what he calls his rule of 5, and he's going to really help us understand this epidemic rise of obesity. He was really a joy to interview. And like Dr. Greger, he also does most of his work on a treadmill. We're going to end tomorrow with Dr. Steve Lewenda. He's not only a personal friend of mine, but he is a Kaiser doctor who's recently won an award for his work introducing plant-based diets to his patients at Kaiser Permanente. He was actually overweight himself, and he couldn't help himself until he learned the secrets that we're going to share in this Ultimate Weight Loss program. And he recently lost his father, which is the reason that he adopted this way of eating and the reason that he continues his work to honor his father. And you're going to hear his very inspirational story. You may need to bring a box of Kleenex for this one, and you'll love Dr. Lewenda. So on day 2, which is Sunday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. We don't have any of our Irish speakers that day. I'm not sure we had any Irish speakers. We're going to kick it off with Dr. Neil Barnard. And he's going to be talking about seductive foods and their consequences. You probably know Dr. Neil Barnard is the founder and the president of PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And he actually wrote a book called Breaking the Food Seduction. And he's going to be talking about which foods are actually addictive and why these will not help you lose weight, and as a matter of fact, probably hinder your weight loss if you're including these foods in your diet. Right after Dr. Neil Barnard, we're going to talk to Dr. Hans Diehl. He is the founder of the CHIP program, which stands for the Complete Health Improvement Program, where he's had over 85,000 graduates taking his program. And he's going to talk about how we became overweight as a society in the first place and how to change it. Because, you know, we weren't always overweight. It takes about 300 years, spoiler alert, for genes to change. Our next interview was actually added, believe it or not. We had 24 experts, and I was like a kid in a candy store. Every time I talked to somebody, I said, but I have to interview them. I have to interview them. We actually had completed the summit when I had heard Dr. Linda Carney, who I actually have worked with and known for over 10 years, on another summit, and I just had to include this information because it's a voice that is not popular in the health community, in the plant-based community, and especially in the weight loss community. But she really is an expert on female health, hormonal health, and specifically on things like nuts, coffee, and alcohol. She's going to get to the real truth about whether these things are good or bad for weight loss. And she's going to talk about 17 reasons why caffeine may not be as good for weight loss or anything as you might think. Be sure to turn into Dr. Carney's interview. She's not afraid to tell the truth, as none of our experts were actually, which is why they were chosen. They're not going to sugarcoat anything, I promise you. We're going to end Sunday, March 17th, with Jeff Nelson. Jeff Nelson is the founder of VegSource, a very popular blog, and I met him years ago when he started producing a wonderful conference in Los Angeles. And what's interesting is so many of our experts were actually influenced by so many of our other experts in this summit. For example, when you hear from Dr. Lewenda, he's going to tell you that it was reading Eat to Live that caused him to change his diet. And in Jeff Nelson's case, it was his wife's very serious autoimmune disease that led him to Dr. McDougall. Jeff Nelson has a very interesting weight loss story himself because it was quite accidental. He was actually just trying to help his twin daughters, not even with weight loss, but reverse their acne. So it's a very interesting, inspiring story, and Jeff Nelson understands as much about weight loss and calorie density as any of our other speakers. On the third day, which is Monday, March 18th, again, we're always going to start at 10 a.m., the first speaker is Dr. Columbus Batiste. Dr. Batiste is the head of cardiology at Kaiser Riverside. And he's going to be talking about stress, free radicals, and inflammation caused by food. And what's interesting is all the medical doctors will talk about how we don't really need one diet to reverse heart disease, and one to reverse autoimmune disease, and one to reverse diabetes, and one to reverse obesity. They're all going to suggest you eat the same way for all of these conditions. And that's why if you're somebody that isn't overweight or has never been overweight, I know some people said, well, I'm not going to listen to the summit. I'm not overweight. Well, that's great, but you probably know somebody that is, because something like 90% of people now are overweight or obese. I know you hear that number quoted a lot lower, but when you hear Dr. Furman's interview, you're going to learn that it's really 90% of our population that's overweight or obese. So if you're lucky enough not to be overweight or obese yourself right now and not suffering from a lifestyle disease, you may still want to listen to these interviews and tell your friends who are, because you're going to learn that the same diet that all of our experts recommend for overcoming food addiction and obesity is the same one they're going to recommend for the myriad of lifestyle diseases that plague most Americans. Dr. Columbus-Batiste is such an eloquent speaker, and I think he's going to move you deeply, especially when he talks about how unfair it is to people that can't afford good food. Dr. Furman also talks about that a little bit in his book, Fast Food Genocide, but Dr. Columbus-Batiste really talks about how these fast food companies, you notice they're always in neighborhoods where people can't afford healthy food, and it's very unfair. So after Dr. Batiste, we're going to talk to Dr. Tom Campbell, who's actually a speaker this year in the live Ultimate Weight Loss Conference, along with many of our other summit guests like Dr. Michael Roizen. He's the son of Dr. Colin Campbell, and they co-authored a book called The China Study, which the New York Times called the Grand Prix of Epidemiological Studies. Well, Dr. Campbell wasn't even a medical doctor when he wrote the China Study with his dad, but then he was so inspired, he actually went to medical school, and now he runs a clinic in Rochester, New York, at a hospital, which is a weight loss, weight management, lifestyle change clinic. And so what's really great about Dr. Campbell is that he is not just talking about things from a theoretical or a research approach, but from a behavioral approach, because he works with patients every single day on this problem, on weight loss and weight management. And he's going to be talking about some things that could sabotage your efforts that would otherwise have you adopt a healthy diet. And he's just terrific, and I enjoy talking to every speaker, but there's just something so warm and engaging about Dr. Campbell. And like many of the other speakers, he's going to talk to you heart to heart and have you understand that if you are overweight, if you're obese, if you're suffering from a lifestyle disease related to these conditions, that it's not your fault. And many of the speakers are going to say that there's no reason to feel shame or blame. You pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you start again, because now you have the information that's going to help you succeed. Don't give up. There's always hope. And Tom Campbell is really going to talk to you heart to heart and have you understand that there's no reason to feel shame or blame or guilt, because you were never designed to solve this problem in the first place. Brenda Davis, the dietitian of all dietitians, what a brilliant speaker, passionate about what she's doing to save the lives of humans, animals, and the planet. She's going to give you insights into which dietary patterns are going to help keep weight off long term. And she's also going to be able to tell you why these diets that are so popular today for quick weight loss, which by the way isn't sustainable weight loss, things like the ketogenic diet and the paleo diet, are disastrous for long-term health. And there's no evidence that they even lead to permanent or sustainable weight loss. You'll love Brenda. Dr. Jay Gordon was probably the hardest speaker to get, believe it or not, even harder than Dr. Dean Ornish. He's very busy because, like many of our speakers, all of our speakers work, Dr. Jay Gordon is still seeing patients today in his very busy, thriving practice in Santa Monica, California, where he is the pediatrician to all the celebrities. He's written several books about childhood health and disease, but I really wanted him to talk about childhood obesity because Dr. Gordon was the star of a documentary that came out many years ago, which you can, I think, probably see for free now. If not, it's probably very reasonably priced. It was actually produced by one of our speakers, Jeff Nelson. And Dr. Gordon was the star of a documentary called Processed People. And in that documentary, which I believe was about 10 years ago, Dr. Gordon said something that was astounding, that we now have the first generation of children that will not outlive their parents. So even if you're someone who doesn't have kids, that doesn't want kids, that'll think they'll never have kids, I encourage you to listen to what Dr. Gordon has to say, because our future is at stake with what is happening with our children. And he's going to talk about childhood obesity, how devastating it is, and what we can do about it. So especially if you are parents, you don't want to miss Dr. Gordon's talk. Dr. John McDougall, one of my heroes. I wouldn't have lost these 50 pounds and kept them off if it wasn't for the 40-year work of Dr. John McDougall. I so enjoyed talking to him, and I talked to him, I think it was 2.5 hours. I mean, you're not going to see all 2.5 hours, but it was a treat. It was a joy. It was a privilege and a pleasure, because he hasn't been doing very many interviews. You know, he had a disaster, a catastrophe in his life on October 9th, 2017, I believe it was. He lost his home in the fires in Santa Rosa, with him and Mary escaping basically with, I believe, a wristwatch and one cell phone. Lost everything he owned, and it was devastating. And he's back. He's doing his webinars now every other Thursday, but he hasn't been doing a lot of interviews and appearances. And this interview was actually the first thing he did before starting up again, speaking at his McDougall program and speaking at his webinars. And he talked about what he's been telling people for 40 years, that the fat you eat is the fat you wear, that carbs don't make you fat, that fat makes you fat. And it was so wonderful talking to him. So he'll talk about starches and that what human history tells us about them. And how could human history be wrong when this is what people ate throughout all of human history before people were fat and sick? So we'll be ending that day with Dr. John McDougall. The next day, which is March 19th, I believe, 22, 21, that's a Tuesday, huh? Tuesday 19th? Yeah, Tuesday, March 19th. My mom always said Tuesday was a lucky day because that was the day I was born. And you are in luck, because Dr. Garth Davis was another slippery one. And by that, I mean that many of, these people are working doctors. They're busy. A lot of them are curtailing or not even doing personal opinions anymore. And I kept praying and praying, and he said he would do it, but finally he did do it. And I so enjoyed talking to him. He is so handsome, easy on the eyes, so encouraging to talk to. And again, a bariatric surgeon that wants you to understand that you can do this without bariatric surgery, and that he's going to tell you what you should consider doing before you even consider bariatric surgery. So I hope you'll tune in to Dr. Garth Davis. He is just so great, and he's so passionate. If you follow people on social media, he is just so great to follow on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, because like Dr. McDougall, who we ended with the day before, he's not afraid to speak the truth. And he is also very compassionate, and he understands, even though he actually did lose weight. He wasn't obese or really overweight, but just like all of our speakers, once they adopted a plant-based diet, they lost weight even if they didn't need to. But he really does understand how hard it is to be obese, and even morbidly obese, because those are the populations he works with. So I think you'll know that all of our speakers have a soft spot in their heart, whether they were overweight or not, for this particular problem. And really what they want to do is help. The next speaker, I met him the first time during this interview, and since doing the interview, I actually flew to the Balance for Life retreat in Deerfield Beach, Florida, to stay at his beautiful resort on the beach called Balance for Life, where he does therapeutic water-only fasting and feeding. And boy, I got to tell you, I loved him when I did the interview, but in person, I loved him more. He's almost 70 years old, and he has the most beautiful skin and bright blue eyes. It just shows you that this way of eating, it works for vanity too, guys. It's not just for weight loss. I know you're going to love Dr. Frank Sabatino. He is just not only a wealth of information about the things that are the missing link for effective weight loss, like hormones, stress, sleep, but he knows so much about food addiction. And again, another compassionate soul. He's not new to this. He's been doing this as long as many of our other speakers, but he's going to be new to a lot of our audience. And I hope that after this summit interview, that changes. And I hope he becomes a household name. Dr. Roger Gould and I, we go way back, actually. And it's really interesting that we live in a world today where you can read a book and then actually meet the person that wrote the book. And when I think about all the experts on this summit, most of them have books, and most of them I've read all their books, but most of these speakers I have actually had the privilege now to meet in person or at least interview because of reading their book. It was really funny because a long time ago, I was buying something from Amazon, and I don't understand how the internet works, how Facebook actually knows what I'm thinking of buying for my dog. It's just crazy. It's like they're spying on me. But it was about 2012, I believe, and I was just buying something that I bought on Amazon, and something came up as a recommendation, and it was a book called Shrink Yourself. And I really liked the title, because my brother's a psychiatrist and he has a license plate that says shrink. They call psychiatrists shrinks. But what I liked about the title of the book, it said Shrink Yourself, and it was a picture of somebody laying on a psychiatrist's couch with a tape measure. So the idea was shrink yourself, in other words, get smaller, and shrink yourself, psychoanalyze yourself. And I thought, you know what, that's really clever. And I went and I looked at the reviews and I said, you know what, that sounds like a good book. And I bought the book and I really liked the book. I really did. It was about emotional eating because Dr. Gould is considered one of the world's experts in emotional eating. He used to run a weight loss and weight management clinic at UCLA for many years. He was quite well known in LA for that. And now he practices psychiatry both in Los Angeles and in Manhattan, where he is bi-coastal. I read the book. I liked it. I got in touch with him. And I hired him and came to speak in one of my in-person classes and one of my in-person conferences. And it's funny because many of the people that bought the package, which is totally optional, this whole thing is free, but you have an option to own it for life. People have been writing me comments about what they like about each speaker. And one of the comments is, for them, this was the missing piece. I never got it until now. So I think you'll really like what he has to say on emotional eating. And he's very direct. And he says that we have to be an adult. We have to be an adult if we want to get over this problem. The next person, just like Dr. Frank Sabatino, I did not meet until I interviewed her, but then I actually just did, and I think we became friends. I mean, I feel we kind of want to speak for her, but I think we're friends. We text each other, and she's also going to speak in my Live Ultimate Weight Loss Conference. She is just beautiful, inside and out. She's known as High Carb Hannah, and she has a wonderful story of how she lost weight, 70 pounds, using the techniques that you'll learn from most of our speakers, specifically, as she says, her hero, Dr. John McDougall. But she also talks about what's a missing piece in a lot of people's weight loss journey, which is self-love. And you're going to learn that from her, patience and self-love, which are some of the keys to making this weight loss experience more enjoyable. And honestly, without which it may be difficult, if not impossible. Because guys, let me tell you something. If criticizing yourself and hating yourself and being disgusted with yourself and talking badly to yourself worked, then we'd all be thin by now. You're going to love High Carb Hannah. So the next day, Wednesday, March 20th, we have Dr. Michael Clapper. And again, as I mentioned, when Toby came to me to do this summit, he had the 24 speakers that he asked me to interview, and it went up to 34. If he hadn't stopped me, it probably would have been up to 64. And as much as I love Dr. Clapper, he wasn't on that original list. But then I heard him say something at the True North Health Center. I have been hosting a program there for the last 8 years called the True North Holiday Extravaganza for 11 days, where I do lectures and cooking demos, and we have fun and games and things like that. And Dr. Clapper and I actually shared a house together for those 11 days with his wife and with my husband, Charles. And on this lecture that he gave during this time, he started talking about something called cytokines. Well, let me see. I still have to listen to that. So, cytokines. I never heard what cytokines were before. Have you? Maybe you have. I haven't. But he framed obesity in a different way. And he talked about how obesity and inflammation, because of these things called inflammatory cytokines, are intimately related. And he is going to talk about how to break that cycle. I love Dr. Clapper so much because, like some of our other speakers, like John Pierre, who follows him, like Brenda Davis, and like Dr. Michael Greger, they're not only people that help you, overcome your weight loss obstacles, but these are people that have been champions for animal rights for years, and they're not afraid to say that. And so he's just such a lovely man, and you're going to love his talk. I love when he talks about the 4 S's. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but that's what I do in my life every day, the 4 S's. John Pierre is my partner in the online Ultimate Weight Loss Program, and he used to work in person with me when we lived in the same city. If you aren't familiar with him, you can go to his website, johnpierre.com, where you can see him training Ellen DeGeneres. He actually taught her how to do knuckle push-ups when she was on The Tonight Show. I think she had competed in a contest with Michelle Obama. And he really is a fitness and nutritional guru to the celebrities. He's very humble about it, but if you looked at his client list, the ones that he can talk about, it's really like a who's who in Hollywood. He talks about how sitting is the new smoking, and he's going to talk about how you can get the benefits of exercise without actually exercising. And like many of our other speakers, he's going to talk about self-love and compassion and how that's going to play a role in your weight loss journey and recovery from food addiction. Our next expert is Chef Darshana Thacker, and she is the culinary manager, and she's the Forks. She's why everything in Forks Over Knives tastes so good. And we are going to be giving away 4 annual meal plan subscriptions to the Forks Over Knives meal plans. It's fabulous. I have it. I love it. I love her recipes. I love her new book called Flavor. I love her personally. We've been great friends for years. I've moved out of Los Angeles, so I don't see her as well. I haven't seen her since I moved, but we hung out all the time. I love her food, even though she really has never been overweight, maybe by 10 pounds more before she adopted this diet. She knows exactly what you need to eat to not be overweight or to maintain health. And this is exactly the way she eats. And her food is flavorful and delicious. And she's going to talk about some of the studies she's done, not studies, but experiments she's done where she's been able to eat this way on a very, very austere budget. And she just knows that if you prepare the foods that she tells you to, you can eat as much as you want. And that is a bold promise, but it's true. Because our next speaker that day, Dr. Terry Shintani, knows all about it, because he's going to show you and teach you how you can get the effects of a gastric bypass without the gastric bypass, so you don't have to see Dr. Garth Davis. This was my first time meeting Dr. Terry Shintani, and he has been on my radar for about 7 years. I spoke at the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. You can see that lecture on YouTube. It was one of the funnest things I've ever done. And he wasn't able to come, and I have been emailing him for years and years just to interview him. Well, I loved this. I loved all the interviews, but I never met him, and I was just so inspired by him. He's just somebody that I wish I could be friends with, and I wish he could be my doctor, but I would have to move to Hawaii. And again, he not only treats patients, he's a practicing doctor. He is one of the others, like Dr. Garth Davis, that actually treats morbidly obese patients. And you're going to find out where he got his medical practice from. He bought his medical practice 40 years ago for the sum of $1. So the next day, that's Thursday, March 21st, we're starting with Dr. Stefan Essert. And he is a Harvard-educated physician, again, a practicing physician, and a wonderful, inspiring speaker. And he's going to talk about some of the other side effects of obesity that aren't the usual ones, like the heart disease and the type 2 diabetes and the autoimmune disease, because he actually is a doctor that deals with a lot of orthopedic problems. And he's going to tell you that how some of these get better and get better quickly and immediately without surgery or any other therapies when we lose weight. But he also understands food addiction, and he's going to help you unearth the missing piece of the obesity puzzle. We're going to follow Dr. Esser with Dr. Vera Tarman. You know, I read her book, Food Junkies, and like me, she is a food addict in recovery who has an incredible story herself of recovery from food addiction and obesity. And I don't know if she has this title, but I personally consider her the leading expert on food addiction. She is a medical doctor, and she has recovered from this herself. And I think you're going to enjoy what she has to say about this. Right after Dr. Tarman, we're going to go to Dr. Stoll. And again, you know, so many of these speakers, I think that if they weren't medical doctors, they could have been ministers or preachers, because it's not that they're preaching to you, but it's the way they communicate the information with so much love and so much passion. And Dr. Stoll, who is the founder of the amazing Plantrition Conference, it also really understands food addiction, but he also understands the importance of support and community. And he's going to talk about social networks and how obesity is actually contagious. Yep. You know, you're going to find out that you're more likely to become overweight or obese if your friend's friend is overweight or obese than even if your genetic family member is. Right after Dr. Stoll, we have Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr., which many of us get to call Essie. Boy, he's just charming. I mean, what a gentleman. And no summit really would be complete without him. It doesn't matter the topic. You've got to talk to Dr. Esselstyn. Because what's really interesting is, of course, you may know him from his best-selling book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, or his program at the Cleveland Clinic. But what you might not understand is that the same diet that Dr. Esselstyn recommends to his patients with heart disease is exactly the same diet that we're going to recommend to you to recover from food addiction, to lose weight, and to maintain that weight loss. Again, you don't need a different diet for each disease. It really is a one-size-fits-all. I was really honored to get to interview Rich Roll. He has interviewed me twice on his wonderful Rich Roll podcast, but he is such a busy guy, and he's really hard to track down. And when he said yes, I was over the moon. And I feel like many of the people on the summit are kindred spirits, those that had stories of weight loss and recovery from food addiction. But Rich is just got the most incredible story from coming from being a food addict on what he calls the window diet and overweight to being one of the fittest men on earth. And especially if you're female and you have a man in your life that maybe has given up hope or that is overweight, you might want to ask them to watch Rich's interview. He's a really good guy, and I consider him a friend. So, March 22nd is my birthday, and I don't know how it worked out that some of these people are on my birthday, but it makes a lot of sense. So, I'll be 59 on Friday, March 22nd, and we're going to start with the ever wonderful, hilarious Dr. Michael Greger. And he's going to have a new book coming out this year. Is it this year or is it? Yeah, I believe it's this December. But it's called How Not to Diet. And he's going to talk about how every disease from A to Z is linked to being overweight. So he'll talk about the science of the ideal diet for weight loss and disease reversal. Hint, hint, it's pretty much the same. The next speaker on my birthday is Dr. Rosanne Alviera, and she's a geneticist at the UC Davis School of Integrative Medicine, where she teaches plant-based nutrition to medical students. But she's also an identical twin who has done multiple studies with her twin sister, who is obviously genetically the same, but because at a certain point in their life, they split up, went to different countries, and went on different diets. Rosanne, a vegan low-fat diet, and her sister, a low-carb, not vegan diet. The sister became 50 pounds overweight and was really struggling to lose the weight. And she's going to talk about the differences between people that have been overweight than people that have never been overweight, and genetically how women are different. And she's really going to focus in on how certain foods can up or down regulate our fat genes. And she really is an expert in the genetics of obesity. Rosanne will be followed by Dr. Alan Goldhammer, one of my mentors. And he's really one of the reasons I've become, quote, a skinny bitch, because basically I went to the True North Health Center in January of 2011. I met the secret weapons for conquering obesity and food addiction, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, the founder of the True North Health Center, and Dr. Doug Lyle, the psychologist there. They're both actually the co-authors of The Pleasure Trap. And Dr. Goldhammer will be talking about the pleasure trap, this concept, and how to escape the hidden forces that make us fat. You know, like all the other speakers, you're going to learn that if you're overweight or struggling, it's not your fault. Because as Dr. Goldhammer says, we are living in a world that has been designed to make us fat, sick, and miserable. But you don't have to be. Our next speaker is someone who I actually just met on this summit. I had heard his story. It's very inspiring. And at first I thought, well, but this is a weight loss summit. He has a story about overcoming stage 4 cancer, which is wonderful, but what, this is a weight loss summit. And I was surprised because he actually contacted us to be an expert. And I've always wanted to interview him. Well, little did I know the link between being overweight and cancer. And it's not a minor one, folks. It is a major one. And we're not talking about being obese or morbidly obese. We're talking about just being overweight, how this exponentially increases your risk for, I believe, 16 different types of cancer. And Chris is going to talk about that. And like many of our other speakers, also about self-love and compassion and how that's important to your healing journey. Day 8, Sunday, March 23rd, we kick it off with Dr. Lisle. Now, if you know Dr. Lisle, you know how wonderful he is at explaining these things. But what's really interesting about this interview is it's not something you've heard before. And I'm not just saying that to get you to listen. Dr. Lisle can literally take one question or one concept and talk about it for an hour. And he did this because he talks about specifically one hidden force that's preventing you from losing weight. And there's obviously multiple factors why people become overweight, but he's going to talk about this one principal concept. And I think you're really going to get it. When you understand this, you're going to have a light bulb literally go off in your head, wherever your light bulb is. But you've got to watch this one because it astounded me, because I listen to him on summits and interviews. I interview him pretty much every month, but I've never heard him say this before. So these hidden forces preventing you from losing weight are going to be really important as you either continue or start your weight loss journey. After Dr. Lisle, oh my God, I loved her. I want to be besties with her. I had met her for the first time. She must have said no to me 10 times because, again, a busy doctor with a practice like Dr. Campbell. She's running a clinic in New York, a lifestyle clinic, and helping people. She just didn't have time. So finally she said that she would do it if I would do it at 9 a.m. her time. Well, that's 6 a.m. my time, and I'm not at my best at 6 a.m., but I did it, and it was totally worth it. Michelle McMacken, and you're going to hear some really incredible stories of some of the people that she worked with that you would never expect. Can I say it? Can I just say one, or is that too much of a spoiler alert?
Spoiler.
Okay, I can't say it, but you got to watch her. She's going to talk about the surprising common denominator for long-term weight loss, and she's going to be talking about one of her patients that actually lost weight. And, I understand life is hard, guys. I had a very hard life for much of my life. That story is in my book, and I'm not, but this particular patient, when you hear this story, I don't think anybody has these circumstances that this individual had, and yet they were still able to recover from diabetes and lose weight. And so after Dr. McMacken, we have Dean Ornish. Now, I actually met Dean Ornish in 2010 when I was catering an event that was given on by PCRM. It was called Vital Signs Conference, and the speakers were Dr. Ornish and Dr. McDougall and Dr. Barnard, and it took place in my town at the Universal Sheraton, and I made 32 German chocolate cakes and all the breakfast muffins, and I got to meet him, and I shook his hand, and he gave me his card, and because I wanted to give him my book. He said, I never heard from him, and I literally have been contacting him for like 9 years, and for this and that, seeing if he would speak. He never answered me, and he's a busy guy, and I get it, but as luck would have it, maybe because he had a book coming out at that time, or maybe now he heard of me. I don't know. I don't know if he's ever heard of me, but he answered, and I got to interview him, and it was just such a delight to meet him because I've been such a fan of him for years. When you think about it, Dr. Ornish wrote a best-selling book many, many years ago called Eat More, Weigh Less, which is basically the underlying theme of the summit. But he's going to be talking about his newer book, Undo It, and the 4 things that we all need to do if we not only want to lose weight, but live well. And then we want to end the last day of the summit. Actually, the last day is me, day 9, but the last day of the speakers with an uplifting story from John McMahon, who created the I Thrive docuseries. This guy had tried it all, had done it all. His diabetes and neuropathy was so bad that he couldn't even tell that his feet were on fire. And yet he rose, as he said, from the ashes, from the depths of diabetes and its complications, to being a mentor and an inspiration for people everywhere. So we're going to end with him because his message, like many of the speakers, is not to give up hope, that you did not have the information correct, even if you tried it all. So on Sunday, March 24th, we're going to have a summit finale with yours truly, Chef AJ. We're going to discuss the key takeaways from the summit. And like I said, I've been taking feverish notes as if I was going to be taking the SATs on this. We're going to talk about the key takeaways. We're going to talk about some tips for effortless and sustainable weight loss. And I'm actually going to give you the presentation that I'm hired to give at conferences and spas and places, many places. It's my #1 most requested talk called Eat Up, Slim Down, and Get Healthy. So put on your seatbelt, expect a great ride. I'm so happy you're here. And remember, we still have time to share this with all of our communities, our loved ones, our friends, because it's going to change your world. I know it changed mine, meeting these people, learning things. And I never thought I knew it all. But when it came to weight loss, I thought I knew a lot. But I had no idea how much more there was to learn. So if you're excited about this summit, comment below and let us know what you're most excited about learning, which speakers you're most excited about hearing, and how we can help you in your journey towards ultimate weight loss. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, bright and early if you live certain places in the world, but if you live in California, it's 10 o'clock. Take care, and thank you so much for joining us on the Real Truth About Weight Loss Summit, where we're really going to give you the real truth about weight loss.